Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte, Wyatt, and Paul Scieszinski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monte Wyatt.
I'm Paul Scieszinski.
And we are looking forward to today's conversation with a gentleman who's been in the healthcare industry and has impacted a lot of lives throughout his career. And we're going to have some great conversations. So, Paul, if you would, introduce our guest for the day.
The gentleman we have here today comes from the farm fields of southern Indiana. His dream was to get into the healthcare business because he wanted to help people. And he worked his way all the way up to be a CEO of the Iowa Clinics. And we're fortunate to have him here today. And his name's Ed Brown. Ed, welcome to What's Your Ceiling and Breaking Through.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to meet you, Monte, and be here with both of you.
Well, we appreciate your time. And we always start with a topic to get us going. And our topic today is healthy culture, healthy organization. So, Paul, when you hear me say that phrase, healthy culture, healthy organization, what comes to mind to you?
Well, first thing, I think of positive energy. And any company that I've ever been involved with where I see that's excelling and going through the different ceilings and hitting different, whether it's income levels and building that company and scaling, you see that healthy culture. And that culture, in my opinion, is probably, and it's more important today in the last few years than ever, because people want to join that good energy, and cultures is what builds great companies.
Absolutely. Ed, what do you think when you hear that phrase, healthy culture, healthy organization? What's that mean to you?
It means very much as you all have described it. I always used to say culture comes first, everything else follows. I believe healthy culture type organizations deliver the best patient care.
Mm-hmm. I love how you said that. Healthy culture comes first. Culture comes first. Yeah. And I really think in today's business world, there's a lot of places where that is a gap. And it causes problems because you gotta treat people correctly. You've got to behave correctly. You've got to interact and work well together. And that's a great culture, is when you can do those things together.
I remember when our organization was first coming together, Monte, and we spent about a year talking about what we wanted to be and who we wanted to be and why we wanted to be that. And about 50% of that conversation was about culture. And I can always remember we set our priorities for ourselves. And we said patient first, then our departments, patient first, then the clinic, then the department that you were in, whether it be medicine or some other specialty or whatever, and then came yourself. And it's just exactly backwards than what we normally naturally think. We think, well, what about ourselves first? You put it the other way, at least in healthcare, and my belief is everything else comes, and including the patients, because the patients see it.
Yeah.
They know it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Ed, you obviously you have a lot of you got into the healthcare, but how did you get into the healthcare, and what made you decide to instead of go to the medical side, you went into the business side? Kind of tell us how you got into the medical, and what made you decide to go into the business?
And Paul, that's a long, complicated story, but as a young man, I had a situation come up where I was a witness to a traffic accident, a very tragic one, one that resulted in a friend of our family being entrapped in her car after her car had been split in half through a terrible accident of a trailer coming loose. As a consequence of that, witnessing that, I jumped in and got involved. And her father happened to be the owner of the wrecker service, and pulls up and realizes it's his daughter. He sort of breaks down. I take over and back the wrecker up. I get the winch and pull the metal that's wrapped around her body off of her, by about that time, the state police show up, and we then pull the back window out of it. And I'm probably about 16 years of age when this is all happening. I get recognized by the way, she lived and came through it after a lot of challenging, I would say, months of recovery. But the state police gave me a citation and an award that was something that I was very, very proud of. Still proud of to this day. And but that had such an impact on me. I said, I want to spend my life figuring out how I can help people. I want to help people. If I can save lives, if I can do something to deliver health care in a meaningful way, that's what I think I want to do. Now, for a farm boy, that was a long ways off from everything that I knew, but that's what got me into it.
That's a great story.
Absolutely. I love hearing how you help people and you want to make sure that that's the impact. Yeah. And you're putting, and I loved your story about patients first as well. And I think that's a powerful thing, that in your mind, you're wanting to help others first and foremost.
And I don't think I'm unique in that. I think a lot of people who get into healthcare get into it for that reason. Now, through a lot of different circumstances, those interests can change, but the core driver is I want to make a difference in helping people. And there is such a great reward in that. I can understand why people get drawn into it that way.
You bet. Well, tell us a little bit about, you had a career before the Iowa Clinic, and I want to hear, our show is called What's Your Ceiling, and our audience is called The Achiever. And we want to help the achiever recognize ways that they can grow and improve their own life in helping others. And so I want to hear how you grew in that career and how you had to grow yourself in that career to make an impact.
Sure. Well, I think like many people, that my road to where I am today was not a straight line. It had a lot of twists and turns in it. The first one being trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I went to college. Thought I wanted to be a pharmacist and was on a full ride scholarship. And within a short amount of time, I remember calling my mother and saying, I don't think this is what's meant for me. And she said, well, that's okay. I said, good, I'm coming home. She said, no, you're not. You're going to just continue to go to school and you'll have a lot of time to think about what you want to be. Now, that was absolutely the right thing to tell me at that time in my life. But I had no idea what my mind would think about what I wanted to be. And I remember going back, I want to help people. So there were a lot of different choices for me, but I didn't want to go in a direction by which I got to my end goal and I wouldn't be happy doing what it was that I was trained to do. So I chose a profession that gave me a lot of options. And that the profession I chose was nursing. That was very unconventional for a man back in the 70s. And I combined that with having a lot of extra credits because I went to pharmacy school with both business, and I was fortunate enough that the state of Indiana had a paramedic program that started, and I was able to get into that paramedic program in its opening year, and I did that while I was in college. So I got to continue to help people, and I got exposed to a lot of things in emergency medicine. And that nursing, once I completed that 4-year degree, would give me an avenue to go into medicine, give me an avenue to further business, or to go into law, or maybe a nurse anesthetist. There were just an abundance of different pathways to helping people that I would have available to me. And that was good for me, working in the emergency room right after I got my nursing degree. Helped me figure out which of those pathways that I probably wanted to go down, and I decided to go into business. But I did end up picking a graduate school by which, if I felt like going to school for life, I could have become a lawyer, a doctor, and a business person, all at Washington University in St. Louis. It's one of the few schools in the country that would offer that complete set of education to you. And I thought I would be double majoring in business and in medicine. I ended up deciding just to go into the business side of things, and it's been a good choice for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. As you think about your decisions of where to go to school, what did you put into mind? What made you make WashU the decision?
Well, I had a mentor that I reached out to and influenced me about whether I should go into health administration, a gentleman who had been in the business for decades, and he recommended Washington University. He recommended other schools, but he had a bias towards Washington University because he had had several young men and women that had worked for him that had gone there as well. But I looked at several schools. I looked at Michigan. I looked at Xavier. I looked at Iowa. I looked at Minnesota. All of them had great programs. Ohio State. I got into all of them but one, and I was really pleased that I got into WashU. What's ironic about that is the one that I didn't get into was a place in Iowa called the University of Iowa. And what became funny about that is I became an adjunct faculty professor for the university for about 10 years teaching health administration students. And I said, you never know how things come full circle. And I love teaching, so that was a great honor to be able to do that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'd love to hear your story. You were telling us earlier about the career you had before the Iowa Clinic and the impact that you made. And I want to hear what you did in Arizona. And maybe if you want to start before that, you sure can.
Sure.
But I want to hear the going back to our theme of the culture.
Sure. Well, I took an unconventional route. I continued that in my career because most health administration programs train people to be hospital executives. I went into the HMO industry back when it was a four-letter word, as I say. It wasn't a very popular industry at the time because some HMOs were being managed well, some weren't being managed so well. And I started out in Florida in a situation that was a turnaround set of circumstances and had done quite well. And a company came calling for my boss and mentor that I worked there in Tampa, and a company called Humana. And he ended up taking a position with them. Humana was having a lot of pains at that time, and they wanted to turn things around. And we had experience doing that, so that's how we got sought out. My boss convinced me to follow him to Arizona. And that situation was interesting because it was while it was a small HMO, it was very dysfunctional, very disorganized. There was no culture. And I explained to my boss and some of the people at the corporate office that I felt like we needed to do something dramatic to change, or otherwise it would take a long time for us to turn the ship around. So I ended up laying virtually everyone in the office off shortly after my arrival. The corporate office flew in about 4 dozen people temporarily to take over those positions and continue operations. And we went through the process of trying to figure out, who would be a good fit for us. And I was explaining earlier, the first criteria that I went through, because I only had a short amount of time to figure things out very quickly, is I looked for people who graduated from high school in the Midwest. I wanted people with a work ethic and a strong value system that when we worked as a team, they would relate to that. And if you happen to have had a rural background, I didn't mind that either.
Good old country boy. That's it. So you go in, you basically have to fire the majority of the people. And it was more of changing the whole culture, right?
Absolutely. It was all about changing the culture, and the culture ended up driving everything from that point forward. Everybody was new. We would work on ways to get together and develop a team approach to things. There was a lot of communication going on with people, so they knew by myself, they knew what was going on in the company and why we were doing the things that we were doing. And it brought purpose to their particular roles, whatever they might be. And we made sure that the objectives they had and the goals they had in their particular areas of service were clear, and everybody was supporting of that and supporting of them. And so you didn't feel like you were, working in some type of solitary situation, that everyone was rooting for you and you were rooting for them. And when we began working on some of our objectives openly with everybody, we would just have open staff meetings where we'd give a very open report about how we were doing. There was no reason for any of us to be in the dark about things because we were all in this boat together. That culture ended up coming through in the performance of how we operated the company and how it was perceived by those on the outside, in particular the physicians. I quickly went after, we were contracted with physicians, and most of the physicians in the Phoenix area completely dismissed us. I had a couple of computer geeks, I will call them, come in and help me figure out all this green line computer tabbed reports that were in a great big room and it was filled to the ceiling with these things, and I didn't have a clue what they meant. And I said, go in there and figure out what those things say and, come back and get me when you figure that out. And I would go by and see them in there once a week and talk to them. And if you got it figured out, we're making progress. But about 2 months later, I had asked them to put some type of synopsis together to get it on 2 pages. And what they did is there was 2 elements to it. One was financial and one was clinical performance of the doctors. And they profiled every doctor in our network. And oddly enough, I didn't care whether it was completely accurate. What I wanted to use the tool for was send it out to the doctors and see how they reacted to it. And they did not react positively. But I was able to use that as a tool to get them to get engaged and help me make it better. And that began the process of being sort of the mustard seed that turned the culture for the physicians, that we were going to be physician-driven. And you can't have good quality without the physicians driving it.
What a great way of looking at that. Obviously, the doctors got in there for a reason. That's to help people. And then you go into a culture that's negative, and then you got to turn that around. You're bringing the passion back into those doctors. You gave them that report, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they were passionate to tell me why it was wrong. And I didn't disagree with them. I said, well, that probably is, and we need to get it right. And he said, tell me what we need to get right about it. Tell me what's wrong about it. And they were driving the solution. And these 2 geeks went from being analysts to recording everything that they said and going back to the corporate office and saying, here's what they're saying is wrong about it. What can we do to change it?
I really want to reinforce something to our audience, the achiever. You've got them engaged to make it better. And you didn't go in with all the answers.
Well, usually you never have the answers.
Well, and I think that's a great point, because there's a lot of times that people in those positions, you're believing or you feel you have to have the answers. You didn't have the answer. You wanted the answer to come from them, and that's how you got them to engage, and they drove the solution.
I think experience will give you a good intuition of what answers might be, but if you can't validate them, then you're going to be going down a trail alone, and you want to make sure that you're going arm in arm with the people that can make a difference.
Absolutely.
That's a great way. When you inspire, getting a valued opinion of everybody, they feel valued, which inspires. Which gets back to you is, it's the answers within the people that you have, if you got the right people in the right seats.
It's certainly within the scope of what their awareness and their knowledge is and expertise is. And then you allow them to learn from everybody else they work with. They're able to put the mosaic together. Mm-hmm. And that creates the picture. They go, oh, we know what this is all about now. Mm-hmm. And because just being a nurse, you're being a nurse taking care of patients every day, it's hard to get out of that circle that you're focused on. But if you get in there with a lot of other people that have different perspectives in this bigger organization, mm-hmm. they can put some kind of connection to it. Well, while I do this and you're doing this and you're doing that, we have a bigger purpose that we're serving here, whether it is a health system for the community that you live in, or whether it's a clinic, or whatever it might be, that the picture of all of them being together is what makes the organization.
So you go to Arizona, you turn that HMO around, and then you end up.
I get promoted. Can you believe that? I was the first person at Humana to profile physicians, and they thought, well, that's a great idea. Let's take that and see if we can do that nationally. Now, I wasn't responsible for it, but I ended up explaining to the team back in Louisville what we were trying to be accomplished. A lady who was a regional vice president over about 60% of the company had taken a liking to me and asked me to come work for her. And so it was one of the toughest jobs I ever had. I was the guy who had to go out to the field and make sure that all of the field folks were helping us meet the numbers, helping us. That was not a fun job. I used to turn around and after I left, I found out my nickname was Darth Vader. And because if I had to come and point out the same issue 3 times, that was probably not a good thing for your career. And then I had to then figure out who your replacement was going to be. And but it taught me a lot about corporate life. And while I was effective at the job, while I always made sure the company met earnings, and that's how you get rewarded in some for-profit companies, most for-profit companies, I then was given the opportunity to have the largest market in Humana to go to Chicago. And my boss had gone there ahead of me, and she was being brought back to Louisville, and I would be going there to take her place. The problem was we had a 3-year-old girl, and that was not something my wife was real crazy about, living in downtown Chicago, company condominium. They were very generous and had nothing wrong with what the company did. It was just at that point in our life that didn't fit. So I commuted back and forth for a year to Chicago and Louisville. And, one day I was back in Louisville and was asked to come into the big house. And, was called out and said, we want you in the Cranes Business Journal. We want you to see in the public and that kind of thing. And while I made a lot of connections in Chicago, I wasn't as committed as I needed to be. And I understood their position. And so we decided that I was going to leave the company. My wife and I did, and started a consulting company. I gave a 6-month notice, and by God, they kept me all 6 months. That in that time, a company came calling, knocked on my door, and said, "Look, we have a situation, and we'd like you to help us out." Our management company got bought out from underneath us. We were contracting with them to run an HMO that we own, and that company happened to be in Des Moines, Iowa, and it was the Principal Financial Group. And I helped them for a year, and in that time, I helped acquire their number one competitor in the HMO industry, merged them together with the Principal's HMO, and reduced the fees for the local hospital and reduced the fees for all the physicians. And I didn't give them any warning. I just sent a letter out. I was probably the least popular man in the city for a while. And a bunch of the doctors all got together at the Marriott in downtown Des Moines to have a big meeting to talk about this company's doing this to us. And they asked me to come speak to sort of cover their trails so there wouldn't be any antitrust violations. And I showed up. And so we had to talk for about an hour. It was a great discussion. Certainly took a lot of questions and was candid with them about what I saw the economics of healthcare being. And some of them got together and said, we need to see if we can hire that guy. And I politely declined 3 times. I made the fatal mistake of sort of liking them and started to investigate it a little bit further. And you heard me talk about earlier that I talked to a lot of business leaders, maybe about 20 of them, and not a single one of them suggested I go to work for these people to help them achieve what they had in mind. And they wanted to build a clinic. They didn't know how to do it. But in the course of our discussions, I described what my aspirations, if I was to take the job, would be, and made sure that they could live up to some of that or all of those aspirations. And they thought they could. In fact, they committed that they could. And that was that we built a clinic that would rival the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Now, I knew that was a tall order, but you don't get anywhere without something big to strive for. And that became the first step. It was called the Iowa Clinic Healthcare Network because they weren't a clinic yet. And over the course of a year, we merged about 26 offices into one single corporation and became the Iowa Clinic BC.
And then you end up building that from $50 million to over $300 million over the years.
Yeah. I like to think of it in terms of doctors. We built that from about 50 doctors up to about 250 providers, and I would say about 160 of those were physicians. They'd be nurse practitioners, PAs, other physical therapists, other professionals too in there. But it was, and today the Iowa Clinic's even bigger. It continues to grow.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Monte, I'm taken out of this interview. I mean, this is something I know you teach with your clients all the time. And culture, is so important. Inspiring the people that are there. Engage and have that passion. But another thing I know is really important, and I know with your clients, and we try to do in our business, is tracking our numbers, tracking to achieve your goals and target numbers. You've got to track it. You've got to have a history. And you, in your business background, you probably you were taught that tracking, and you touched on it a little bit earlier. And I think that's important because then everybody sees the truth, the map, and tracking numbers or information, period.
Well, and in our business, and I hadn't talked about it earlier, we made sure we started getting involved in research. And we started publishing our research. Our research was both on the management side for outcomes and on the clinical side of outcomes. The Iowa Clinic continues to be involved in medical research, maybe not so much in business research, but I used to enjoy talking about culture and how the Iowa Clinic came to be in front of peers. And one of the honors that I had in the 26 years I was at the Iowa Clinic is I got recognized by my peers and asked to serve on the board of the American Medical Group Association, and eventually became the chair of that association. That's the Mayo Clinics, the Cleveland Clinics, Ochsner's, all the big clinics in the United States, about 300 of them, and they make up about a third of the doctors. That was a great honor. I was only the second non-physician to have that honor.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And it was a big deal. And the other thing that became very unique about it is I also happened to be the chair during the Affordable Care Act during the Obama administration. and went through the due diligence and the decision making and so forth about whether we were going to support it or whether we weren't going to support it. In principle, we did support it, but the actual act we did not. And we had strong representatives on our board, like Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and Geisinger. And while we voted not to support it, we were politically savvy about it and gave them that information on a Sunday so it wouldn't make any news. And then we also allowed members who did feel in favor of it to reach out, and if they wanted to advise the Obama administration they did support it as a clinic, they could. That's why President Obama signed the agreement at both the Cleveland Clinic and the Geisinger Clinic, because while they were on our board and while they voted in favor of it, the majority was against it, and he didn't go to the Mayo Clinic or the Iowa Clinic. But, you know, those experiences, they grow and shape you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think is the biggest challenge in healthcare today, and what do you think needs to be done about it?
oh, wow. That I'm glad you asked me the easy question, Marty.
Yeah.
As I'm looking into the camera. I'm afraid I'd be working for the government now if I knew that answer. The biggest challenge we have is the cost per person in the United States of delivering health care is extremely bloated and absorbent. And our country can't afford that rising cost. And in the face of the economic challenges and the debt of our country, we have to deliver health care differently. We are moving more and more to outpatient. I tell everybody we're moving more and more to home. And I think all of those things, along with technology, are the right thing to do. We are moving advances in pharmacogenetics that are going to transform diseases and taking pills to cure things in ways that we can't imagine. Those things can't come fast enough. So we are finding our system at a fractionated point. We've gone through COVID, and COVID had a dramatic and traumatic effect on our country and on our healthcare delivery system. A lot of burnout. And so we have a shortage of healthcare workers, and we have increasing expenses. We have a formula that is not working financially, and the government is figuring how to reduce the cost of how they deliver that care. And a lot of our systems are not faring well economically. So we have a lot of pains. We're working on getting answers, and I'd say the answers to that are, you know, don't keep doing the same old thing that doesn't work.
Right.
We got to do things differently.
Yes. Yes. It's a different time, no doubt about it, with healthcare. But, you know, I think we'll find a solution.
Oh, it's America.
And I think
we're innovative.
And AI is going to have a big effect on our medical and the future of business.
Yeah, it does. I'm amazed at what has happened to AI, particularly since ChatGPT came on the scene. And, you know, I know there's a lot of security issues and things that are going on with that, and those things will be addressed. I have a great deal of confidence. But I've seen, even in my own business that I'm involved in, where we could capture a patient engagement in an exam room and it'd be at 65% right using AI. That 65% in the course of 1 year has gone all the way up to 85 to 87%. And that's good enough for what I would call the simple, non-complex visit. And I know in our organization, we use what we call AI and CI, and that's clinical intelligence. That's human oversight of a highly trained clinical person overseeing it. And we can get it 100% correct. So the doctor's no longer typing and pounding into the medical record. They can have the engagement with the physician. When they're done with that exam, they're done with it. The note will be on their desk the next day and they can sign off on it. While it's not perfect yet, I predict in another 2 years it'll be almost to that point. And, you adapt and not try, and I say this in everything, if you expect perfection before you execute, you'll never get anything done. Perfection is the enemy of progress. And so that's another thing that you have to accept about the transition is to turn around and accept where you are and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think AI is going to be wonderful, like you say, once it gets under control, and I think it's going to be great for business. It's going to be great for healthcare. But, hey, Monte, a great interview today, and I've learned a lot. And I think it talks a little bit about a lot of what, we talk about in this podcast, and I know the achievers out there, everybody, what does that person have in that secret sauce? Well, we talked a lot about it. We talk about the culture. We talk about tracking, inspiring, passion, the right people. And we got a lot of that right here today with Ed Brown. And,
thank you.
Ed, we always ask this question. Do you want to ask it, Monte? You got any more questions?
I wanted to bring out a couple things that I thought were fascinating from you that I want our achievers to understand and know that it's okay. You built a team from scratch. You did something dramatic and you let everybody go and you started from scratch. When something isn't right, it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference. And I think that's a powerful thing. Culture drives everything. It brings purpose. It brings everyone together. You got people engaged by getting them to help come up with the answer. And I think that's a powerful thing. We as leaders and managers don't have to have all the answers. And most of the time we don't. Mm-hmm. And we need to get those involved that are on the front lines, that are dealing with these things every single day. And I love two more statements that I captured. Perfection is the enemy of progress. And I think that's fantastic. And you don't get anywhere without something big to strive for. And I think that's a great challenge to our achiever is what's that big thing that you're striving for? You don't have to have the answer of how to get there. You just have to choose it, and then you work towards it. So I think that's fantastic. So,
I think it is, too.
So thank you for sharing those key points. The last question that we always ask is, what do you want to be known for?
Oh.
I know, big, deep question here to close our time.
Multiple answers for that for different reasons. I think I want to be, from a business perspective, be seen as non-conventional entrepreneur who is willing to change. I want to be a great father, husband, and known that my family was important in my life. And I have to admit, during part of my career, I was too immersed in my career and didn't give enough to that. And so in my retirement, I'm making sure I give more. And I think the last thing, that you always want to keep in mind, at least I do, is my faith. I want to have lived a life that had a purposeful meaning, and we're only on here for a short period of time to make a difference, and you want that difference to be made in the right manner.
Oh, great answer.
I love that answer. I love all three of your points. So thank you for sharing that. That's that's great, and I want our achiever to make sure you take those things home as well. And we really appreciate, Ed, you joining us today on the show. And
it was an honor. I appreciate being asked.
Love to have you.
When we keep challenging our listener, the achiever, to keep pushing themselves to the next level, keep learning, keep growing, and the more you learn, the more you grow. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Punch that like button, subscribe. We'll get you more great content.